What's up, everybody? It's Dan, Binder Boneyard, coming at you from the office at the shop. It's a beautiful May day. Hopefully it is nice where you're at. Busy weekend, lots of running around. I'm actually recording this on Sunday night. John Donnelly's funeral was yesterday. That was not fun. Did see a lot of people catch up. A lot of people weren't there. I was kind of surprised, but I know how funerals go. So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for telling a friend. Thank you for everything. I appreciate you being here. So today I wanted to go over, we are working on several Travelettes right now. And my friend Cody, who recently dragged home 2 very nice C-Series Travelettes, I figured I would make an episode that's all about C-Series Travelettes, what they're like, what their features, and then how we like to build them ourselves. So get started on that. C-Series just refers to the model range 61 to 68. I know 61 and 2s were C100s, C110, C120, C130, whatever. And then 63, they started going with like D1000, D whatever. I think it was D. Maybe it was A. I can't remember. I know this stuff, but I don't know this stuff. Anyway, you'll see a model change, but we still refer to all of them as C-Series. Just makes it less complicated. So 61 and 2 have the 4 headlights, the dish grille, the emblem is on the hood. All the emblems are on the hood, except for the all-wheel drive emblem. That's on the fender if you have a 4-wheel drive. At the time in the C's, you could get a half-ton 2-wheel drive, so an 1100 or a 110 in a Travelette, all the way up to, they were making Lodestar. They were calling them Travel Cruise. The cabs were slightly different in the Travel Cruise, but, use the same doors, things like that. But, so the options were similar to the single cabs as they went along. 63, they got the round gauges, similar to what the 800s got in 66. Door handle, interior parts changed. They went to the single headlight with the egg crate grille. The doors were still the same as the earlier C's. Just little details that they would change every couple of years just to keep them new and exciting, but they were the same generally all the way through. The curse of the C-Series and the Travelettes are no different, is the cowl rust. Cowls rust out on those things. Just looking at them wrong, they will rust. And then the floors rust. And then the front fender drip edge rusts. And then the roof rusts off and the bed rusts through and the end caps rust out at the bottom. They are one of the rustier of all of the models. Unfortunately, not good enough paint coverage, too many hidden areas, too many pockets to capture moisture. Just not well thought out in that respect. So you figure if you're going to get a Travelette, even the nicest southern Arizona Travelettes, they will have, bubbly under dash. And if they're not rusted through, they will. They're on their way, especially when you guys from the Midwest and East Coast drag beautiful West Coast iron over there, then the humidity and everything just accelerates it. I've seen that a lot, like on the Scouts, these really nice original West Coast Scouts end up in Illinois, and then 2.5 years later, the rocker is bubbling out, and your people are upset. Like, oh, I thought this was rust free. Well, it was until you took it into home of the rust. So anyway, so yeah, Travelettes were available and all kinds of stuff. Same as the pickups. They pretty much had the same options all the way through. You see a lot more of them with the increased capacity heater, which is the one that's the big U-shaped heater core that's got 2 blower motors, things like that. The Travelette has its own special curse. The back wall of the cab likes to break off and separate at the bottom where it meets the floor. There's a pinch weld that runs the whole width of the truck. And on Travelettes that have got some miles on them, even my red 64 is this way. You can push on the back wall of the cab and watch it separate from the floor pan. Almost every C-Series Travelette that we work on in here has that same problem. I think part of it is that there's no mid body mount. There's the floor body mount, front floor, driver, passenger, footwell. And there's the rear body mount, which goes through the cab, the cab support. But in the middle, there is just like hockey pucks that carry the weight in the middle. They don't go through the body. They just rest under there, supporting it. And I think between frame twist and everything else, I think the cab ends up getting twisted around and it breaks that seam across the bottom. So that's something to check for. And if it's rusty, if you got a rusty one, I'm guaranteeing that it's broken across the bottom there. And nobody thinks about it, but it's there. And the Travelette rear doors are the same as the Travelall rear doors. So any of that trim stuff, door panels, window regulators, all that stuff is the same as the Travelall. So it's not as hard to get the parts as people think. I get guys that call here that get a Travelette because it's hot right now and they think that, they're jumping in on something they're going to make money on. And then they call and they're like, I need backdoor this, backdoor that. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. They're like, how do you have so much of this? I thought these trucks were rare. And I go, well, that's the same as a Travelall. And they're like, oh, I wish I'd known that. Oh, I'll call you back. And then I never hear from them again. So, there's my secret tip for you guys. The rear doors are the same as the Travelalls. One interesting difference about the back of the cab is they have their own window size, I should say. On a standard cab, the back window is, 14 inches tall by 36 inches wide. And on Travelettes, the back window is like 24 inches tall by 36 inches wide. Like it's a big square, a rectangle, window. And I will tell you another interesting, I don't know what you call it, but most of that era, they didn't have backup lights. If they did, it was later, 67, 68, and they're not that great. But if you're in the dark and you have your headlights on and your headlights are shining onto something, whatever, another car in front of you, your garage door, whatever, and you look in your rear view mirror, the angle of the back window is perfect for reflecting whatever's at the front of the truck. So when you look in that rear view mirror, you're blind. You might as well be looking at the windshield, because when you look in the rear view mirror, that's what the back window is seeing. It needs some sort of angle. There needs to be a slope or something to direct the light away, but it is a mirror. The back window in the dark becomes a mirror of whatever your headlights are shining on. So you have to use the side mirrors to back up if you can't see. So I recommend everybody put a backup light, something shiny, something bright that can overpower the reflection of the rearview mirror or the back window. Or make it easy to see out your side mirrors, because they are terrible in that respect. And of course, I didn't know that until I started driving one every day. And then suddenly I can't see shit when I'm backing up in the dark. So there's another hot tip for you. C-Series are notorious for breaking the side windows. The felts deteriorate and the tracks deteriorate, and it's metal on metal. And then they rattle back and forth inside that track. And then you slam the door once or twice, because the doors are notorious for not shutting very well. And you break that back, or break it all, break the glass out of the doors. If you're lucky, you have safety glass, which is a laminated, layered glass. So it just cracks. It doesn't fall apart, it just cracks. But if somebody has replaced the glass with safety, the tempered glass, it will shatter. So more than one call from people looking for glass that won't shatter. So keep that in mind. Don't slam your doors. Or if your glass is still good, change the felts out now before they become bad. I just want to say too, if you enjoy listening to these, if they have good details, if they're informative, you can head over to Patreon and become a donator, subscriber over there for as little as $1 a month. I know times are tough, but if I can get 1 million of you guys to donate $1 a month, man, things would be a lot better. So anyway, I appreciate you guys that do donate, and I thank you. But anyway, so the C-Series cabs, that's kind of how they are. They have a crappy headliner. It's just like this glued on piece of kind of fiberboard thing that always crumbles and falls off. So you end up making your own headliner. If you've been following me for any length of time, I have a custom Pendleton wool blanket headliner in my red 64. So something to think about. Now, the meat and potatoes, the part that everybody is here for, is the modification and update. So the 68 C-Series Travelettes are the most modern of all of them, of course. They had optional power brakes. They had optional power steering. They had optional air conditioning. They had the custom interior package, which is the top of the line, nicest of nice. They had multiple fuel tank option. They had all that stuff. They had the biggest brakes. They had you could get the 5-speed. There was a lot of available options in 68. So when we do our restorations and resto-mods, we kind of look at that 68 as the starting point of our builds. So we do power steering. The 68 steering boxes are very hard to find. So we end up making a bracket that we weld to the frame, and then we use D-Series steering parts. The D-Series box mount, D-Series mount, steering box itself, D-Series pitman arm. We use a conversion drag link because we do Chevy front axles when we, if it's 4-wheel drive already, then it's just a simple axle swap. If it was a 2-wheel drive, then there's a little bit more we do there. But so we use a conversion drag link and the D-Series steering stuff. And if you're going to do that, the one thing you have to note is 68s were the only year with the 2-piece column, where it had a rag joint in the middle of it, kind of part way up the column. Any of the other years, you have to cut the column and then machine a bushing to carry the shaft, because the shaft will rattle around inside the sleeve. Then you have to weld a Borgeson or Flaming River steering U-joint on, because it has a 3/4 inch diameter. So the Flaming River goes right on, welded on. And then you have a piece of D shaft, or the collapsible D shaft that Borgeson sells. And then you can put a U-joint at the steering box. And it's like the Scouts, they're 32 spline, 13/16 or whatever it is. I can't recall off the top of my head. I know I have them on the shelf, but so then you put that on, and that's how you get your steering, your power steering, without having to change the entire column. You just can chop the column and go that route. Same with the brakes. We have a power brake kit that works on pretty much all of the C series. If you have a 3-speed on the column, it's a little tricky. You got to do a little bit of grinding on your shift arms, but so the power brake kit, and even power with drums is still wildly better than the manual brakes that you would have had pre-66. I know some of them had like a hydrovac option, or people put them on after the fact. So they had vacuum boosted brakes, but it's not quite the same as the pedal mounted booster, in my opinion. They're good, but they're not quite the same. So we sell a kit that updates that, and you get power brakes. So, when you're building these trucks, the first thing I can say, power steering, power brakes, GM, axle swap, either both axles, yes, you need to do both axles, because your rear axle is going to be 5 on 5.5 if you have a 1/2 ton, or it's going to be the 6 on 7 5/8 or whatever the big 6 pattern is, which you can't get drums for anymore, and the wheels are hard to deal with and whatever. So if you are building a C series, just find yourself a pair of axles, 14 bolt rear and a Dana 44 front out of some GM product. That works great. Don't get Dodge stuff. They're a weird width, and the brakes on Dodges are getting hard to get parts for nowadays too. You could go Ford if you were doing a drivetrain swap and we're running a driver's drop transfer case. Fords would work, but I generally try to caution against that. So that's kind of where all that is. Those are the big beats. Power steering and power brakes really bring them into the 1980s as far as drivability goes. They really get nice. The problem with the C's is like the door fit's not great. The way the latches work, the doors rattle around and bounce around. And if you've got brand new door gaskets, it's still like they shut hard and then wobble around. And so, you have to deal with that kind of thing. But no, as far as the upgrades go, like that's the 2 biggest ones. And then you go powertrain. We've done a few LS swaps, a few diesel swaps. Remember, the insulation is minimal on these things. So if you're going to go with Cummins or something, you got to insulate the bejesus out of it, coat the firewall with insulation, lizard skin or something. And then the interior needs a firewall pad and the carpet kit and all that stuff to help fight the noise. That's definitely a must. But yeah, powertrain comes down to your preference. I mean, I've driven tons of them with International Motors all over the country, and fuel economy, not awesome, not terrible when they're tuned right. You're getting 10 to 13 depending on options and how you're set up and how fast you're going. So the 12 valve or DT 360 option definitely picks up the mileage. It's a lot of work. You got to, butcher the whole core support to run a radiator intercooler setup. Firewall needs work depending on how you go. Like the one we just did with the 12 valve, we had to cut out a little bit of the floor for the bell housing on the driver's side, and then we had to cut a little bit of firewall so the exhaust manifold bolts were accessible. Other than that, it went in okay. We'll see when the cowl or the front clip goes on, we'll see how that radiator and intercooler work out. We're going 2nd gen Dodge. It's a 1st gen VE pump motor, but we're going to go 2nd gen radiator and intercooler to help offset, any overheating that may happen. Because my experience with them is every 12 valve I've had in a international always likes to get hot. And so, because the grill opening just isn't that big, it's kind of short. If you look at it, it doesn't have a lot of room for airflow. So, you need a lot of radiator in there to help offset that poor airflow. So that's that. We put a 5.3 LS and a Travelall recently. That was not terrible either. I know Abel Burke on Facebook, he does a lot of those. He loves that LS conversion and his C series stuff. And I think he's making a side hustle out of it because he keeps building them and then selling them. But yeah, the LS is a good option, 100 more horsepower than the 345 and, better economy and better parts availability. So, I don't blame guys that go that route for sure. I personally like the simplicity of the international motor with the carburetor and that kind of thing. I end up getting myself into remote situations where I don't always have a laptop or a way to tune something. But once the LSs are dialed in, like they seem to be pretty reliable and pretty straightforward. But if you want to go ultimate in reliability, I would go diesel, mechanical diesel like that. And if you're going diesel, Dana 44 front end is just about the limit of what that thing can carry around. You'd go through ball joints faster than normal, carrying around the extra weight of the diesel. Because the Cummins is a touch heavier than a 392. So I would probably go with, a Dana 60 Dodge or Chevy. The Chevy spring width is perfect already. It goes right in. The Dodge spring width is wider. Like I said before about the Dana 44s, the Dodge 44s, you've got to move the spring perches or widen your springs. So I put a Dana 60 in my black Travelette and I had to widen the springs. That was easier than moving the perches. So that's what I did. But yeah, if you're going to go heavy duty diesel option, I would say Dana 60 front, 14 bolts, still plenty for the rear end. Unless you're going to go all heavy, then, you might want to step up to a Dana 70. And don't at me, I've already gone down this route. The Dana 70 in the 1-ton Chevys, have a 10,000 pound GVW where the 14 volt has a 7,500 pound GVW. So, the Dana 70 is the better option if you're going heavy, which again, in my black truck with the DT and the Allison, I'm running a dually Dana 70 out of a C30 Chevy truck. And it had the 10,000 pound GVW because it has 4-inch axle tubes and it has gigantic brakes and stuff like that. So, the Dana 70 is the next progression up from the 14 volt if you're going in that 1-ton plus range. Lift kits for them, straightforward. Just like on the single cabs, you cut the rivets, move the front shackle hanger back to the next position, and then you can run, square body Chevy lift springs. got to do a little bushing modification to get it all in there. But, they go in fairly easy. And then you get your options of lift kits. I usually do a 4-inch lift. There's a kit we get off of Summit that is 4-inch springs with a 4-inch block. And then I use a longer shackle on the front spring, so that it has room to move around and not run into the frame. And it ends up making the truck sit damn near perfectly level. If you're going to run like a winch bumper and a bunch of weight up front and that kind of thing, I would forego the 4-inch block in the back and keep the factory 3.5-inch block. Because then, or if you have a 2-wheel drive and you have no block at all, then you need to find the factory 4-wheel drive 3.5-inch block. But then you go that route. Then once you put your winch and your bumper and your accessories and all your stuff on the front, then you sit level. I personally prefer a level stance. I don't like the raked rear high stink bug look. Just doesn't look good for me. And I definitely don't like the Carolina squat where the front end is, 1.5 foot higher than the rear end. That looks not cool either. So yeah, I would that's what we normally do is a 4-inch with a 4-inch block. If you're going taller than that, you do a 6-inch. I would do a 4-inch block with the 1-inch add a leaf. And then, that is a little bit different, but it somehow still comes out to about level. I'm not sure if the manufacturers are just fibbing on their spring heights or what, but you get a little extra or something. I don't know. But yeah, so there's that. The NP202 that comes in the 4-wheel drive ones is very durable. If you want to run that behind a 2-wheel drive transmission, like your NV4500 or something like that, that's fine. You end up with a very short intermediate drive shaft. So a lot of times we just encourage guys to go with the married transfer case setup. And then you'll have to run a carrier bearing in the middle. That drive shaft is too long to go right from the transfer case to the rear end. You above 65, you start turning that drive shaft into a jump rope, and that is dangerous. So you got to go with a two-piece drive shaft with a carrier bearing. And again, don't at me. I've been down this road. I've ruined drive shafts. I've spit more than my share of them out, and the carrier bearing is the way to go. That's what I have in my black truck. Put a kajillion miles on that setup and no vibration, and I can go as fast as I want to go and not have to worry about it. So I think I've covered most of the bases. Oh, fuel tanks. We make aluminum fuel tanks for these if you're going to stick with a carbureted gas setup. And even a fuel injected setup, we can put a pump in one of the tanks and then, make a transfer pump to go from one tank to the other tank so that you can fill up on the fly. Or there's this option of a single rear tank. We did a Blazer, like a 38-gallon Blazer tank between the rails on a C-Series truck before. And the trick with it was getting the filler, and we had to cut the frame, notch the frame, and plate it, and then run the filler out the side of it, and then punch a hole in the bed. So the bed, there was a filler in the bedside. So that was the only bummer on that. I think if we do it again, I'm going to build our own tank with the filler in a different spot that we can route a little more cleaner. But either way, yeah. Between the rail tank is what a lot of guys go with when they're trying to run different powertrain and they need, simplicity. And I get that. Having two tanks is a pain in the keister. I hate on some of these where I have to fill up one side and then turn the truck around and fill up the other side. It's such a pain. So, on the black truck, for example, it runs one tank. On the green Travelette I have, it has 2 tanks, but I've rerouted the filler to the passenger side. So now I can fill up both tanks from the passenger side, which helps a little bit. My red truck only has 1 tank, and I've run out of fuel a lot with it. But yeah, so when the red truck gets put back on the road, it will have a single rear tank. But anyway, hopefully that points you guys in the right direction, gives you some insight into what we do here, and maybe gives you some inspiration for your own builds, Cody. But yeah, if you have any other questions, message, hit me up on the socials. If you're not following me on Instagram, I go over a lot of this stuff on Instagram all the time. So follow me there. The Facebook business page gets a lot of it too. At the Binder Boneyard. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for telling a friend. And until next time, I'm Dan from Binder Boneyard.